over to you, Kevin.
All right. We're beginning the first of 2 weeks of legislative updates. We have Senator Dugger here today. Next week, we'll have a couple of our representatives here. So Senator Dugger, it's all yours.
Shane, the next 10 questions are yours. No, there's only one side, but you got to figure out which one. Right back here in the club. As I got ready this morning to go through part of this, and as people begin to come in, I realized that we had a number of things in common and things to talk about. The biggest thing on political deal is the bear. Yeah, the bear, the black bear. You all know about the bear because you've had him here as a speaker, at least his advanced publicity person. So Bigfoot is alive and well. Bigfoot's bill got passed. I don't know about 900 of these others did not fare as well, but Bigfoot did. Sometimes when you get in those situations, you ask a person, does this make sense? Well, the author of it swears up right and left and every other way you can possibly do this to say that it's very important because it brought people in to do questions and so forth. That tourism abounded because of this, of Bigfoot. I think it's a bunch of nonsense personally, but it made him happy. So we, if he'd have been here, we could have find him a whole lot more. So let's go ahead and get into a few of the things that happened in the legislature this past year and discussion, because I think that's probably somewhat important. And I'll try to keep this fairly short because everybody will get up and walk out if I don't. So anyway, let's talk about the number of bills. There was 1,567 bills filed this past year. 1,567 to go roughly 2.5 months. It's amazing to me that that our society, our state, needs that much correction that we have to have 1,500 bills. And it's absolutely amazing to me. 584 of them, though, went to the governor's desk. So there must be something valid, including Bigfoot. It made it to the governor and got passed. So those things are somewhat important. I'm going to talk about two or three things. The budget, of course, is the number one thing that we do at the legislature. That's bottom line things every day. And takes all the session that we've got to get there, plus some we sometimes get legislative. I'll finish up a little bit with some of the comments that we've heard regarding the redistricting and who'll be your senator and that type of thing in the future. And for the most part, it'll be me. But anyway, let's talk about a few of these things. This budget that we have delivers substantial savings. It provides tax relief and prioritizes education and provides significant numbers of education. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about the numbers of education because that's the big boy of the entire deal. The budget in Oklahoma is mandated that education be funded through as a constitutional expenditure. This past year, the budget was roughly 47%. It's been about 50%, but we had a lot more revenue this past year. So I want to go back to revenue again and tell you where the revenue came from that we didn't have before. We had a better year in the oil and gas industry than we had had before, and it began to pick up. It was low to start with at the first of the semester, but got better during the session as we continued on. And in that regard, the oil and gas industry was a major significant player. Retail sales and sales tax were a major component of the budget of the state of Oklahoma. Certain people got a bill because they wanted to do specific things. I saw Jim earlier in here, but anyway, we'll talk about convenience stores for a second, that they are significant to the state of Oklahoma and a great partner. And there was a special bill that allowed them to put money into education in certain areas that they specifically wanted. And that particular one, again, benefited education. And it was one of those bills that I was glad to carry that particular one, and especially see it go through the governor. Bills that go through sometimes get looked at all the way through. You have, can they get through your committee first? Can they go any further than your committee? Because most all of them have to go through appropriation if they have any funds involved in them. And most things have funds involved in it, so they all go through appropriations. And that particular bill did, and allowed money to go into Stillwater that would not have done so any other way. I don't think Damona's here today. She helped with part of it. Early in the session, part of what happens in one of the bills and so forth is really important, I think, from the standpoint that, again, it's these things coming up and being told, no, we're not going to have that. Accreditation for the vet school here at Stillwater was very, very not going to happen early in the session. Absolutely wouldn't happen. Every time then we had an appropriation subcommittee that I sit on that particular committee, I'd ask the question, what about vet school? Because I knew it was short. I knew they needed the money. They needed the money for accreditation and a few other things with vet school to keep them top notch in the state of Oklahoma. Come up following week, we had a meeting each week. They came up again. How about the vet school? Well, it got right down to the last part, and it never made a specific bill, but it was setting on the overall appropriation allocation amounts. And so I asked the chair of that one day, I said, well, where's my deal on the vet school? And he said, in the bill. So I immediately turned to the senator that was on my side, because it would be under his particular guidance, and said, is that vet school in there? He said, yes. I said, is it in there for this amount? And he said, yes. Right after that, I said, can I go call the senator that, and also the dean, and let him know that this thing's going to make it through? And he said, yes. So the senator gave permission, and we went through this thing, and we were able to give Oklahoma State University and the School of Veterinary Medicine $3 million. And that's going to help their accreditation a lot as a positive. We're now, one other thing that we got this year on health and services is that we had significant amount of money thrown our way, partially by a governor's initiative, to move the state labs out to Stillwater. That and Career Tech are the only two state agencies in Oklahoma that are not housed in Oklahoma City. But back to the health department, basically, that was put in basically by the governor, done pretty quickly, and we followed up with it and made sure there was financing there. So I think that's really important at the same time. Back to education for a minute. Education picked up 5.5% this past year. They had been on Common Ed, the K through 12, getting the lowest amount of money taken away from them each year. So in other words, they were a whole harmless, basically. All the other agencies in the state were putting money in, especially this, up till this past year, they were doing that. This past year, for the first time, we began to show money. It began to look better each time the treasurer would give us a report on money. And as a result of that, this is the first time we've had money to solve part of the problems that we've had in the past and that we've needed help on. So I'm really happy to say that that we were able to fund that, and we were able to fund other things in education that, and especially in higher education, that we did not have at all. I'm going to stop just a second, just make sure. There we go. So we caught up on bills this year. So let's go back to one thing that I was told when I first got in 2 or 3 years ago. They said we didn't have any money then. We were taking money from everybody. It didn't matter where it was. If it was in an account and we could get our hands on it and it was legal, we took the money as fast as possible. In the last 2 to 3 years, we had to. That's how bad the budget was at the time. People wanted raises. There was no money. People wanted program improvements. There was no money. We didn't have it at all. This past year, we have gathered money in a lot of sources because it was availability there. And I think that's really very important. And as we started, I'll go back to the deal that someone told me one time. If you get into this deal, you'll find that you've got money some years and other times you have no money. And the toughest ones you're ever going to face is when you have no money and you got to tell people, no, you can't do that. Well, I'm here to tell you it's a whole lot easier to settle things if you got money. And I think Jim will agree with that. And so we had money this year for the first time in several years. It looks like the budget's pretty good. The reserves are good. There's roughly $800 million. You've heard 1 billion tossed around and so forth, but we had to get into that a little bit to come up with money for Medicaid and a few things like that. The Medicaid bills that are out there will still take some work in the future because they're due this coming year that we have to actually fund it. We had to kind of identify this past year, so we identified a fund and we had excess funds that we could do that. The governor had his own view of this and said everything will go under the way he would like to see it done. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court didn't agree with him. And I say unfortunately because that meant that they stepped in and said, this is not a veto override. You weren't right in the first place. It's not constitutional. And that was one of the 2 bills that did not pass for the governor. It'll be part of next year's first things that we work on. So that takes care of education just a little bit. Basically, common education appropriation increased by $171 million or 6% to a record high of $3.16 billion. That's, as I said, that's the big boy for education, is the big one for higher ed as well as K through 12. This budget provides for tax relief, if you will, kind of money coming back, if you will. It reduces the top personal rate from 5% to 4.75 with subsequent reductions in later years. It reduces the corporate income tax rate from 6% to 4%. I think that one could have been left there. They say it's an economic development item. It's so low on corporations that I don't think it really matters that much whether we left it or didn't on the corporate income tax. A lot of controversy came about because of incentives that we had. Incentives are sometimes used to stimulate the economy, but we've had programs that didn't stimulate the economy exactly because it didn't require things to be paid back. We passed a bill this year to try to match things that are done similar in Georgia and so forth, to bring the film industry in here into the state of Oklahoma, more so than it has been done in the past. And so there's about a $30 million pot that they can draw money out of, but they ultimately have to give it back through operations and so forth. Now, I admit, if the company went completely bankrupt, they wouldn't be paying it back, but ones that aren't, they'll be paying back that money over time. That's the new twist that we put on the funds available for education Broadband service. We really need that in Oklahoma. A lot of places, smaller schools, rural areas, those type of things. It had $42 million allocated to broadband services for the incentives to providers to get out there and make this broadband happen. And so that's one of the economic incentives that we think is really good. This particular bill takes into account people of Oklahoma. It takes into account one that has been thought of by the public a lot, and that particular public on thinking of these is the earned income tax credit. You're probably familiar with that. I think it's important that we have that, and it'll help a lot of families in the state of Oklahoma. I want to get back to comments on a couple of things. I've sat on enough different committees and so forth like that, that they evaluate us about what we're doing, and they do it in economic development. Incentives are done by the READ evaluation, and economic improvements for families and kids is done by the Oklahoma Advocacy Group, both of which I led the Oklahoma delegation in both child advocacy and economic development, as far as my votes being supportive of those. I'm proud of that, quite frankly. I think it made a difference in Oklahoma. And over the last 4 years, my vote on the READ has got me in the #1 position of being supportive to economic development. And like I say, I'm proud of that particular one. I think that's what this group wants. I think that's what Stillwater wants. I think it's a positive for Stillwater. And I'm very happy to be a part of it. So this particular budget provided money for historic sales tax conversion, allowing a number of nurses and medical doctors to be increased, and with scholarships and so forth to help our economies. It will be a very positive bill, and one that I was happy to be supportive of. There's also for mental health units, we haven't had much of that in Oklahoma for children whatsoever. There's $9.9 million being allocated to that for the first time in the history of Oklahoma. So all of these are positives. Till you get down to this one, we put roughly $20 million, 10 out of our own fund to fund things, and allocated another 10 million to do things. And those are the things that you've read in the paper regarding the McGirt allocation with Indian policies, be it started out being just criminal. The courts all got into it and said, wait, this appears that they never signed all the documents they were supposed to sign. And so right now, we anticipate this next year, we're going to we'll use the original 10 million that we put in this year, plus the 10 million we took out of allocations and added to it. So we've got a $20 million fund sitting there waiting to be used if necessary. We hope it's not, but we've got to be prepared properly to do so if that comes about. Jim, I don't know a better way to do it. I think it's a tough situation, and I'm not looking forward to that one at all, quite frankly. We have a bill that's a pushback bill, basically, for the Attorney General's office to push back against federal overreach and represent the state in legal challenges, again, associated with McGirt. So that's the final part of that part, that we not only did the Oklahoma part, but we went in and said, hey, as a federal program, we want to be able to have some say in it too. I hope we have a positive outcome between the state of Oklahoma and the Indian tribes in Oklahoma. I think working together, we've got the opportunity to have a stronger, better result than what we've had for a number of years. And so I hope that happens. Pension funds. This past year, we had COLAs for the first time in 12 years. And that was in one of the pension funds. We've got our pension funds in better shape than most of the states. We were reviewing one the other day that specifically the OPERS program, which is the state payroll oriented group. So that was, as we went through those, we realized that for this past year, we've been able to not only balance things out, but we've been able to contribute money that we weren't able to contribute in prior years. And it's a positive, I believe, to be able to do that on a retirement basis, it was justifiable based on 12 years. So not having one in the 12-year period. Some of the economic things that are positive in Oklahoma is becoming more and more of a leader in aviation. That's our second highest earning area. Engineering, well, we've got one example of that in ASCO right here. That's part of that overall aviation. That was their growth was in excess of $35 million last year. That's significant for us. I'm going to drop back for just a second, talk about total budget. Total budget's $8.4 billion. That's on appropriated funds. That's the highest in Oklahoma history. There's also part of what's where we get money. We get money from select agencies. Select agencies are those non-appropriated agencies that get their money from other sources. Let me give you an example. Let's say a doctor has to have a medical license. The administration of that medical license is under select agencies because that's the license itself. So we have a $8.4 billion appropriation budget, plus we have another $6 billion that come through Oklahoma from those particular select agencies that have licenses. State Fire Marshal is in that group. Lots of places, all the medical ones are in that group. All the professional societies are in that group. When we get ready to do an examination, my committee does oversight education review, as well as anything else that is not unappropriated. We have oversight in those. And that comes through select agencies. And we met with them yesterday, one of the groups, in fact, and actually two groups. The first one was one that I talked to you about, select agencies. The second one is a select agency, but it's where we get money from. And we're going to be up substantially. We're going to be up almost half again the price of what we've earned through the Oklahoma lottery in the past. And that's coming in this year, and they're going to announce that today, that they're way above where they expected to be for this particular year. And that'll help our budget for this coming year. In fact, it'll help a whole lot because it gets announced today through the treasurer's office, through a news conference. So you'll probably see that in the papers. And I had no idea that we picked the same day to one day in forward of that to actually be with that agency as they got ready to make their announcement. So that's important. The lottery goes greatly, it's allocated, the money comes in. Most of the money for marijuana and lottery all goes to education. That's where they come up with this 50%. Now, I say all, it's not quite all, but it's the majority of it. Let's see if I've got other things, and then we'll do questions. Legislative, we've done that. Talked about the budgets. Oh, one of the things we did this past year, we didn't see it too much in here, but you may have heard quite a bit about it. Richard probably heard a ton about it. Then this is securitization bill on utilities. We get this call and says, we're going to be hit with $1 million, and we don't have $1 million here in Glencoe, Yale, whatever. We don't have that money. We need help from the legislature. We were able to put together a bond issue, much like a bond issue. It's not actually a bond, but to be spread over a number of years to where people didn't get hit with a bill that was $3,000, $5,000, $1,000, $10,000. We were faced with those kind of bills where the people of Oklahoma were. It's better to spread things out. It's like buying a house as far as I'm concerned. And some of those types, you buy the house by making annual payments. That's basically what this bill did. It allowed that to be done on a statewide basis and kept a lot of people in their homes, quite frankly, in Oklahoma. So that's helping to do the right things at the right time. Election reform, which is interesting because it's out there, and the only thing that's basically lacking is the vote that will put this into effect. And at the present time, Payne County will be broken for the first time in 8 years. Jim's got better negotiating skills, I guess, than I do, but we had one county that stood by itself, was the same as the federal allocation. And Jim had set that up. By changing it, there's 31 counties now. And so I've got more going east all the way over to Lake Keystone. And I gave up some of the southwest part of Stillwater to do that. That shows the growth of Stillwater is much faster. And that will be in a different senatorial basis if you're in the far southwest. Everything else is the same, which runs out to just past Country Club Road on the southwest. We'll go to a new senator. Senator's already elected, basically. That's the present time on the yeah. So there'll be people in this room that'll get changed. Joe, you can Joe, you can come see me anytime. I think you may still be in that area, okay? So I'm still fair game. But, there'll be some allocation. The majority of the allocation, though, will remain District 21 and that's the district that you've seen me in for the past year. With that, touched on a lot of things real quick. Any questions? Next, Gary. It's about 82%. So there's what? The difference between your 82 and 100. Most systems around the country are not that high, quite frankly. Oklahoma's done a great job in the last 10 years of recovery. Yes, sir. That was part of what the discussion was yesterday.
Tom, with Matt Pennell was here, our Lieutenant Governor, he talked about ag tourism being a big push for the future. Is there anything being done in that area at all?
I think the Lieutenant Governor continues to work on that program. I look for him to roll something out positively on agro education and agro tourism, things that will happen.
No bills this year, though?
No specific bills at the present time until the Lieutenant Governor comes up with one. And then he'll find somebody in the Senate that he says, I want you to run this bill for me. And then they'll look at it like any other bill. But I suspect the fact that he's the Lieutenant Governor, it'll get looked at maybe a little first in the area. We like working with Matt. Matt's done a great job in helping the economic development string, especially in the rural areas. So it's been a real positive. Gary,
Has the marijuana tax brought in as much money as has been projected?
more. Yeah. And evidently you don't have to have a license if you're down around McAllister either. There's about what, $14 million that they picked up and put in the truck. Golly, I'd have never gotten there without that help, James. Kevin. Oh, every fund that we had available to get that 800 million, we maxed every one of them. So every single one of the funds are full at the moment. They haven't seen the gas numbers that were set in here today. That's going to be up above that. They haven't said a whole lot about, as we were teasing everything, tourism and so forth is up in Oklahoma. It's a positive. So we're going to be up in a number of things. The lotto, if you will, is up substantially. So in every one of those type of things that generate money, we're going to have money in those areas.
It's not a budget question, but I heard this at the donut shop.
It's fact then.
Was there some new legislation that limits who can own real estate in Oklahoma?
That was a deal that has come about primarily because in Western Oklahoma, there was, and still is to a certain extent, a availability to buy up land by the Chinese government. Stacked as an individual, but it's not. There's not anything out there yet, but it's being worked on. So that's about all I can tell you. I had more stuff on Bigfoot, but we'll have to let that go. And unless Shane can answer that question, let's see, where is he? Could be. Yeah. Now remember this, I didn't call on you and we didn't get you. So, I'm lobbying now to stay clean and off your fines. Okay. We'll see.
Thank you, Senator Dugger.